Okay, we've spoken quite a lot about participants and publics generally. We now got a session on engaging participants. And you probably remember that the EGC was steered away from public engagement as a priority in the 2010 by the review panel in 2010. And they stated that they doubted whether it was appropriate for the EGC to engage directly with UK Biobank participants or the public. But now that they're coming up for another review in 2015, it's a good time to reflect on public engagement again because things move on, as we found in other areas to do with Biobank. And I know many of you consider public engagement to be an important issue because a lot of you mentioned it when on your registration form. Remember, you were asked what concerns you thought were going to come up in the future around biobanks, and a lot of people put something to do with public engagement and trust and participant engagement. So we've got 3 speakers to help us consider the topic, starting with Andrew Trehearne, who's the Head of Communications for UK Biobank.
Thank you very much for that, and it's a great pleasure to be here. And I found the previous sessions particularly interesting. I'm going to start with a picture of myself. I know it's quite unusual to start a presentation with a picture of oneself, but just to introduce myself as Head of Communications at UK Biobank, and I've been there for 7 or so years. I'm also a UK Biobank participant, and this is a photo of me when I joined the project 7 or so years ago. Possibly I've lost a bit more hair since then. I have actually put on a bit of weight, though you may not believe that. And I notice I'm wearing the same special outing suit that I wore on that date. So there you go. The eagle-eyed ones of you may have spotted that. A bit of background. I know you've had quite a bit of information now about background to the resource, so I won't go through this slide in any detail. But there was some discussion yesterday about minority groups and how one ensures that you can have people from minority groups within a resource. UK Biobank is a national resource, and of course one of the things that we could do is choose where we located our assessment centres. We had 22 up and down the country. And we had an assessment centre in Birmingham, we had an assessment centre in Hounslow, we had an assessment centre in Nottingham, which encroached a little bit on the people living in Leicester. And I think this allowed us to invite people from a fairly wide background, particularly minority groups. And we took out advertising on local radio stations, Punjabi radio, for instance. I spent a lot of time writing to community leaders, religious leaders and the like, just to alert them to the resource, so that if they got questions from people within their own community, they would at least know that what UK Biobank was, even if they couldn't answer the key questions. Since recruitment, there have been a number of enhancements. The 24-hour diet questionnaire, 220,000 participants responded to that. So that's a number of responses we had. So some people responded just to one, some people undertook all 4 questionnaires, some people didn't respond to the first one and undertook the second one. And I'd suggest that it's just a matter of timing when that particular email fell, that people felt that they'd like to take part in the questionnaire. 20,000 people on repeat assessments. We have sent out, or in fact we've had sent back, 50,000 physical activity monitors now, which measure activity for 7 days, 24 hours a day, on 50,000 participants. And the response rate to that is, I think, actually approaching nearly 60%. And I think, that is quite astonishing, really, when you think that people are just receiving an email pretty much out of the blue and asking them to wear something like this. We've had repeat assessment of 20,000 people, and we're undertaking various other activities, as you can see. I think, not to be complacent at all, but I do think that the sorts of response rates that we're currently seeing with participants to this and to the imaging study, which is running at about 40% wishing to take part, indicates a fairly healthy and a fairly happy group of people who are taking part in the project. In terms of ongoing engagement with participants and the public, back to the ethics and governance framework again, which we've heard a lot about so far yesterday and today. It does talk about regular communication, a variety of ways for communicating, including listening to participants and the general public, research users and the scientific community. And then it goes on to list some of the things that we might do, and I'm going to talk about those in a little bit more detail as I go through this presentation. But what do we have to talk about? Well, there's always an enormous amount going on within UK Biobank, as I discover every time I sit down to write the newsletter, and it might take a month or two to draft the newsletter and to get it cleared. And by the time I've done that, I realise that there's some other important thing happening which we haven't included, which we now need to include, be it a new questionnaire that's going out by email, or be it some other aspect of the project. And it does surprise me all the time just how active the project is in terms of thinking about new ways of using the data, using the resource, and gathering new data that might be helpful to researchers. And to my mind, there's nothing that we do that wouldn't be of interest to participants in some way, shape or form, from who's using the resource to how we link to medical records and how we do genetic analyses, what that actually means. I think these are all interesting topics and ones that participants quite rightly may want to know about in a little or more detail. So on to just what do we do and how do we do it. I'm going to go through this table in a little bit more detail. I think that something we never really talk about, but which is a big part of the life of UK Biobank, is the Participant Resource Centre, which was part of Cardiff University, established during the invitation phase of the project to answer questions and make bookings for participants or members of the public then who wanted to participate in UK Biobank. But they've been around now for 6 or 7 years too. I phoned them just before, when I was creating this presentation, to ask them a bit about what the last year's been like, and they've taken 40,000 calls or emails in a 12-year period. And I think that is a huge volume of, that's a huge indication of the sort of interest that there is out there from participants about what it is we're doing. Now, many of those will be people responding to things we've asked them to do, so whether we're an activity monitor, will they come to imaging, would they do a health questionnaire for us? But out of that, we get a lot of questions about the resource, which we take very seriously and which we respond to at a personal level. And just moving on to that, responding to correspondence. I mean, I think have written about 5,000 letters to participants over the course of the last 6 or so years. Once again, a lot of it is questions about what it is we're doing, what is linkage to health data, that sort of thing. But a lot of people are very keen to tell us about changes in their own health, and they write us long letters saying that they've become diabetic, or they've had an accident, or there's been some other change to their health. A lot of interest around when they're going to hear from us again. If people tend not to say, in fact, people don't say, I'm sick and tired of receiving a questionnaire from you by email. What they do say is, I haven't heard from you for some time, am I still in the project? Which I think is a good thing. And also, and not to forget, throughout all of this period, we've had some other activity which very often has resulted in face-to-face contact with participants. So it wasn't a matter of just recruiting participants between 2006 and 2010 and then not seeing them again. And so we do get a sense of what's going on in their minds, what they're thinking about, what they make of the resource, how they like to see it used, simply because we are seeing them at assessment centres in one way or another. We have had 20,000 people in the Manchester area back for repeat assessment. We're now seeing people for the imaging. So there is that kind of ongoing face-to-face contact all the time. And I think, once again, that's important for us, just as an anchor, really, to remind us that this resource is about real people, about participants who have given their time and continue to give their time, you know, on the understanding that we're going to do something positive and good with their data. Obviously, the media, my background is in news and massively interested in trying to get some media coverage. We've been very lucky with that. We've had some very positive regional and national coverage about the resource. Fergus Walsh, who is the BBC Health correspondent, is a participant of UK Biobank. He doesn't mind me telling you that because, of course, he's told thousands, millions of viewers on TV that he's a participant, and he's followed the resource very closely. And we would engage with the media whenever we can, and we think that we've got a good news story to tell. We notice there's obviously a lot of people out there who surf while they're watching telly, because we know even the moment that UK Biobank is mentioned on telly, the number of people who start looking at the website just spikes enormously. So that's juggling for you. Yeah, so the website, there's a comment earlier about the website not being up to date. I'm sorry if that's the impression. I don't really think that's the case. We very much pride ourselves on keeping the website up to date with the latest information, and we're exploring new ways of doing that. We're asking scientists to provide short video clips of the work that they're doing. I think if scientists can't explain their work in a minute and a half of video, then maybe they shouldn't be doing the research. You know, it is an important skill, and it's a skill that they will need to develop over the coming years if they're to secure funding. So I think that's important for them, but it's massively important for us, and certainly better than reading a 2-page, 3-page PDF. We're experimenting with animation, and over the course of the next year or so, I think we'll take a hard look at our website and check that it's performing properly, and I'm sure there are ways that we can improve it, and not least to develop some sort of sensible and easy to use database that will allow people to search the approved research and the published papers that are coming out of the approved research. Public meetings. So we have little experiments underway at the moment in Edinburgh. We've written to participants in Edinburgh and invited them along to a public meeting at which our chief scientists will be talking about the resource, and we're going to introduce them to a couple of scientists based in Edinburgh who are now using the UK Biobank data. We think that's a good two-way thing to do. And we'll have an opportunity to ask them all sorts of questions about the way that they view UK Biobank and any concerns or questions that they may have. Following on from the conversation earlier, I think there is a discussion to be had about how and when and if they'll ever form a view as to whether their participation has been worth it. I suspect many of them think that that is the case already, but it'd be interesting to know how they may be thinking about measuring that. We have 18,000 participants in Edinburgh. We mailed 2,500 by email. I thought we'd have a response, you know, possibly 30 or so people come along. Well, within 24 hours we were full, and we're turning people away, so we're going back for a repeat meeting. I've promised the people who we've turned away that we'll go back in January or February to hold a second meeting to invite them along, and then we'll roll that out over the rest of the country. But if we get a similar response rate in other cities to Edinburgh, it's going to be one heck of a road trip over quite a long period of time. So I'll be buying a VW van and a tent, I suppose. I've mentioned published papers, 20 or so far. It's up to us to ensure that these are easy to find on the website. People need to know how the resource is being used, not just the scientists, but members of the public too. Of course, they have a right to know what sort of research is coming out, and how they've been a part of that, and whether it's the sort of research that they thought UK Biobank would be doing when they joined the project. The newsletter, which does drive a lot of the emails and correspondence that we get, goes out annually. We send about 320,000 by email. That's the number of email addresses that we have, and the rest go by post. If we get a bounce on the email, either a hard or a soft bounce, so if we have an office address from someone on holiday, or if the email address is not recognised, then we pop that translates into a postal newsletter, and we put a little message in saying, you've got this by post because it seems that your email address is now out of date. And we get a lot of people updating their contact details on the back of that. Late adopters to Twitter, but I thought it was a good idea, bearing in mind that the project really relies on the trust of participants, and where there's trust, it's always sensible to be a little bit cautious about what you do. We started to tweet, and that's seeming to be quite successful, particularly for the scientific community, but we do know that participants use Twitter too. I see lots of tweets from participants saying they're now wearing their activity monitors, which is on the wrist for 7 days. So I think this is a learning curve for us, but it's something that we will be using more of in the future. And talking of the future, I think we're in discussion at the moment with a company that may be able to help us create webinars for the future. So finding a way to communicate with scientists and participants by getting a couple of scientists, maybe users of the resource together, and encouraging participants to email in or listen online to a conversation that they can be a part of. So I think that's all quite exciting stuff for the future. Just some examples now. I'll go through these quickly because I'm sure my 12 minutes is well and truly up. Yep. Scientists talk about the resource. This is a published paper. Dad's influence on birth weight linked to diabetes genes, and a nice piece of video that we got out of that for the website. TV should have embedded this Channel 4 piece into the presentation, but there would be no time now to show. But we do get a lot of coverage on telly. We have an imaging microsite, so for people who are asking to join the imaging project, we have a special website which is predominantly video and animation, encouraging them to take part in telling how the results will be used. Twitter, UK_Biobank, please follow us. Some discussion about participant panel as a representative as possible of the UK Biobank population and able to express views typical of the participants generally is what the Ethics and Governance Framework say. We believe we do have a panel. It's at least 320,000 people. We contact them by email. We could contact 500,000 very quickly if we needed to, if there's a particular issue that needed addressing quickly. We've tested this with the access procedures, consultation. As I said earlier, we nudge participants all the time with the newsletter, with web-based questionnaires, invites to repeat measures, imaging, activity monitor. As I said earlier, this is a very living participant resource, and we're acutely aware of that. We believe the digital world may be able to offer a lot more with regard to talking to and listening to participants. Challenges, keeping up with published research, clearly, staying in touch with an ageing population, absolutely. But I think the one for me and the one for people in the kind of lay area who are not scientists is making sense of the new research techniques and understanding their likely impact on participants and the public more generally, so as we can then talk to participants and say, hey, look, this is important. This is something that we need to think about. Did we expect this to happen when you consented to join the project? And just one final slide. The UK Biobank Consortium, is just one tiny, tiny piece of UK Biobank, and yet it's resulted in 12 research areas of distinct research. I mean, there's a huge amount of research to come, and we just need to ensure that we can keep up with it and talk to participants about it. No, that's it. I'll end there. Thanks very much. Sorry.